See how that works out.
Why wouldn't it work out?
But, well, you know, because we got to have our pizza, we got to chit chat a little bit. I might have to reset it. Yeah, I'm going to grab a slice of pizza, thank you. Or you can grab me a slice of pizza. Just pick one at random.
Jeff always gets the most unique and diverse pizzas. Like each pizza is like 3 different types in one.
It's variety. It's great.
That's good, right?
Yes. Have some pizza.
My name's Jeff.
There was one.
Is your name really? Can't say that then.
Yeah, no. Sorry. The audacity.
Okay. Christian, if I get up during your presentation to get seconds or thirds of pizza,
Okay, what kind of pizza you
is that
want?
all right?
I don't know. Don't worry about it right now.
I'll be quiet.
Thank you.
It won't offend me because I've been tempted to do that a couple times.
Okay.
You'll just be doing what everybody else is thinking.
No way.
It's like you stop the presentation, like, hold on, I gotta go get some pizza.
There you go. There's no more
The
pizza.
people on Slack might not like that.
I don't believe that.
Oh, no.
All right.
I'm
So I
actually
think-
really interested to hear about your arrays in JavaScript, because that's one thing that I know very little about.
They have a pretty decent selection of functions that.
I'm excited about this too. I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I think this is something that kind of gets the short thrift when it comes to different type of, I'm going to be focusing on array methods. I think this is going to be good.
Okay.
I'm glad you're referencing MDN and not W3 schools.
Dude, no, you got it wrong.
Don't hate, man. Don't hate.
W3 is terrible.
No, it used to be terrible, and then they switched. Then MDN got terrible, and W3 schools got way better. Because the problem with W3 schools was that their examples were from 1990, before JavaScript was invented, and so it was more PHP than JavaScript in the JavaScript examples. Okay, but what happened was MDN came along and they updated all their stuff, and so they had relevant examples from people that were a little bit more curated, right? But MDN started losing, or W3C started losing money because or W3 schools, because that's their whole business model, right? So then they started going through and systematically revamping all their examples. Meanwhile, the cool kids joined in on MDN and started screwing everything up. Instead of having a simple example of, hey, you want to do this with an array? Here's probably the most common way to do it. The headliner on MDN is, hey, want to see the most complex thing you could have ever possibly done with this and all of its advanced options in a way that you'd never realistically use it? Check it out!
My complaint against W3 schools is every time I get on there, they try to sell me women's clothing.
Well, have you considered that maybe you're a racist?
I'm thinking that the algorithm thinks I'm a transvestite. That is my theory.
That would be an edge case.
If it does this in incognito, I'd be appalled. If it just knows your IP is the trans IP.
So here's the thing. Do you share an internet connection with your wife?
I don't have a wife.
Oh.
So kind of.
Oh, I got nothing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes my wife is doing specific searches and then I get her ads and I know that's because of the IP sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm opening up a private tab, then I'll get ads based on IP address rather than based on. And since she doesn't use a private browser and I do, when IP address is the only thing it's got to go on. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely understand. I wish I could use that as an excuse. But I'm just going to have a cloud hanging over my head from now on. People will be thinking about that during the presentation. What's going on with you? I'm sorry, I met you the other day, but I forgot your name. Raphael. Raphael gave me a great idea for this presentation. I don't even know if you remember it, but
I don't.
no. You asked me if I use examples, try not to use contrived examples.
No, you have to go down to the cafeteria and then
You
Jeff has
told me
to-
that, yes.
Okay.
So for example, an example that has like no relevance in the real world.
Food.
And I'm gonna try to avoid that. For the most part, I'm able to do that. There's a few contrived examples, but
Well, yeah, it's really hard. That's why people use contrived examples.
yeah, but I've managed to keep them to a minimum. So I'm happy about that.
All right, let's see. Do we have anybody in on the Jitsi? Oh, Keith is in on the Jitsi. Hey, Keith. So, unfortunately, we probably won't be able to hear you. Let me see if I've got my sound set up correctly. Yeah, currently I don't hear you. Let's see.
So, Will, are you the
Let me.
engineer? Or,
I'm gonna update my audio devices and we'll see if we can.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll work at,
Oh, that's right.
we'll work at Savvy Legal in, Provo.
Okay.
Hmm.
Is it more consulting?
Interesting.
software consulting work?
No.
Interesting. Interesting indeed.
Actually, my position kind of changed.
So I'm gonna have to change that up.
I started as a front-end React developer. But now I'm gonna be doing Node.js. Because one of our main devs who does all the back-end Node.
I don't know what a UCO2 is.
Of course.
Hey Keith, can you try saying something now?
So, is that
Still not
ideal?
hearing you.
Is that what you want to do or what you have to do?
All right, how about now?
I was fine doing front-end.
All right, I heard the hello.
It's just so easy.
So if you,
Kinda just
the funny thing is, people on the stream are going to be able to hear you better than I am.
My whole career as a PHP developer and had to do full stack and.
I can, but when I'm doing it this way, I can't actually adjust my own volume because of a weird thing. So
Less stressful, but,
it's kind of like one of those HDMI modes where
very long history with.
it expects you to be able to control the volume somewhere else, and so I don't have control over the volume.
He's gone, we're gonna make you code Node,
Oh wait,
so I probably won't be doing front-end stuff anymore.
Okay.
Um,
I haven't actually programmed
What methods
Node,
are you going
they're just JavaScript.
Is that again?
Is Node
what methods are you
hard
going
to learn?
Well, I'm gonna.
let me see if we got anybody live on the chats here. Oh, I can't get logged into the chat right now. Let me try this again.
Well, reduced, I'm actually, I'm not gonna do that one.
Pulling in like
Because that one is rarely used
libraries, like
anyway.
packages.
I think with those, you'll kind of get the gist of it.
Just
And
like
I'm
you'll-
also gonna do
you'll have to
index
kinda
of,
learn, like,
contains,
like
and,
Yeah. like how you're
slice,
supposed to
slice.
communicate with it. Like all that
I was
sort of
forgetting
things.
exactly how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, it's easy
Right.
to forget them. I've
been
caught
coding
myself,
JavaScript for
forgetting them
Cool
and realizing
beans.
they actually provide some
Getting
good
to know it more.
And,
All right, so I'm pretty much ready over here. Give me 2 more minutes so I can grab a slice of pizza and then I'll be ready to go and we can switch over to you. So you're on that side?
here?
Yeah, be over there. That way I can get you a little bit better with the camera, and I'll man the chat
That's what I'm learning.
over here.
Yeah, I would say if you're learning that, they've got you on the right track.
And then I guess what we're gonna do first is you're gonna talk about something about,
It's
Oh yeah, I'll do the intro.
you do the intro and then, okay.
perfect. It's
I look forward to
taking
that.
a regular function and like the async function. There's lots of methods which I'm sure Christian's gonna go over, like on the array object itself that are so useful, and if you use it the right way, you can really do some cool stuff. And that you can use in front end and.
Alrighty.
Is-
Hey, have y'all all joined in on the Discord?
No, I saw you
It's
mention
kind
it.
of a different beast.
Yeah, go ahead and
Pattern.
join in on the Discord. And then I'm going to tweet this out real quick. And if you wouldn't mind retweeting it,
Ruby did
that would be
start
great.
the PC thing, I think Ruby was.
Does anyone have a dry,
in
oh,
what
here's the
modern
dry
development
recipe,
is
just in
now,
case.
what modern web development is now.
Oh.
Every framework basically rips off features from Ruby on Rails.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
My handwriting's terrible anyway.
That means you're a good programmer. My brother Michael is the same way. There's no need to encrypt what he writes on a whiteboard. Only he can read it, and yet he's a phenomenal programmer.
That's my version of what's the toughest version of encryption? Like,
What do you say, the strongest?
yeah, the strongest version of encryption. I don't know it off the top of my head.
20.
ADS 256.
2048 bits.
Yes, that's my handwriting.
Theoretical, theoretically, the NSA can't break 2048, but they can break 10 to 24 and everything below.
What about 4096? Would this match better?
Yeah, I wonder. The talk
Wow, that is
the
one.
talk I watched said they can passively break.
So your name is
28,
Raphael?
24.
Oh, really?
Kyle.
And apparently there's ways to downgrade the TLS to like Netscape Navigator days, so you can break it. It's probably a very low percent now, but people would convince the server to downgrade the TLS encryption to like 512.
Wow.
Yeah,
So they can look at everything you're doing?
yeah. No, I'm pretty sure they have. I'm pretty sure they can break all SSL right now.
Really? That's good to know. Your browser would tell you though.
Drop your phone.
If you're not doing anything,
It's okay.
that's the crappy thing, is like, if you're not doing anything bad, you know, you have nothing to hide, and then, you know,
Yeah.
but it's like, dude, it's my data.
Yeah. How about you
It's
don't
the
want
American way.
It's American,
My
you know. How do we know you're not a terrorist if we don't, look at everything you're doing?
Exactly.
Tread not on my data.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna mimic a flag now.
It just like aggregates everything anyway, but like, somebody, like, yeah, like, maybe if it flags something, like, a person has to still look at it.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that now people are saying like, oh, get a VPN, and really all you're doing with the VPN is just handing your data to a proprietary service.
Yeah,
So you're taking it away from, you're taking all those DNS requests that your ISP can see and just moving it to another network.
It's like, do you trust Comcast or
Comcast,
NordVPN?
NordVPN, yeah.
Wait, hold on. All of a sudden, well, now you're on my side?
Huh?
You're coming over to my side now?
What side? What?
Like what, VPNs are useless?
Yeah, because before you were talking about how you want to SSH proxy everything and VPN this, that, and the other. Now you're saying they're useless?
No, I'm saying the idea of VPNs is moving your data from your ISP to another
they
ISP.
still obfuscate like somewhat, you know?
I mean, yeah, so from your router to the VPN service, then they're just gonna mine all your stuff, right?
They could.
Unless it's built on VPN, which says they do not collect your data.
Yeah, they said.
I'm gonna go wash my hands. I'll be back and then we can get started.
Sounds
I'll
great.
order the pizza first.
Yes.
Who knows what they do?
I don't know what order I
You
should
like
do things
fruit?
in.
Me neither.
But hey, why don't we do brief introductions in the next 3 minutes? So, we've got a good chat going. That's awesome. But let's get some names out there. I'll start because I'm standing and speaking. I'm AJ. I run the Utah Node.js and Utah Rust meetups. I'm the son of Douglas Crockford in a spiritual sense. And I've been JavaScripting for longer than you've been alive, even if you're clearly about the same age as me. No, that's not entirely true. Christian?
I'm Christian Rodier, and I've been JavaScripting since 2016, and loving it.
Nice.
Who would like to go next?
I'll go. I'm Jake. Nice to meet you guys. I've seen most of you before. I just started my first JavaScript job, so.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I was doing PHP before, and now I'm in the JS world, so. But I'm a complete rookie, so.
Who do you work for?
It's a company called Seamless AI. They're in Ohio, so we know about.
With AI too, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool product that they have. So they find business leads with AI. So if
Nice.
you're a salesman, you want to like get a list of people to sell your garbage to, you can use our software to do it. So and it's all like automated. It's pretty cool. But yeah.
My name's Kyle Cruz. I am currently in the last month and a half of my coding boot camp with the Tech Academy. And my background is systems engineering, but I decided to come to the good side in about October of last year when I started. So I'm learning a whole host of programming languages at a basic proficiency, and JavaScript is one that I want to take to the next level, and that's why I'm here. And I graduate in a month and a half, so I am looking for jobs.
Congratulations.
I'm looking for jobs unashamedly, and I would love to talk with you if you have any ideas for me.
Cool. My company's hiring, so that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah? Want to talk?
My name's Will. I just recently got into Node, actually like a couple months ago, so I've been doing PHP my entire life, and I finally decided I'm sick of it. So I moved over to Node and React.
I just noticed you have a freaking.
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, really, that's sweet.
Yeah.
A Linux fan, I like it. Or not a Linux fan, you got it because you don't like it.
No, I like it.
Awesome.
They would have to cross.
Exit.
I'm Alex Butler. Yeah, I did like a coding boot camp a while ago, but just barely got a job. It's like a QA job.
Oh,
I don't even know if it's going to utilize JavaScript yet. I mean, I'm sure that they use JavaScript, but we'll see. But yeah, just interested in programming in general, and like, yeah, happy to be here.
When did you graduate your coding boot camp? Oh, okay. So it's been a while.
what do you QA test over your
So right now, we're like SQL, so I think I'm going to be like, I don't know, like looking at the queries, or that'll just be useful. I just barely started, so like, it's kind of up in the air, but I'm excited. It'll be
Cool.
cool.
Oh, my name's Rafael. I'm just a hobbyist programmer.
Nice.
Nice.
Cool.
For the passion.
Yeah.
Is Jeff our last?
Mr. Jeff.
Of course.
Oh, we're just doing introductions.
I'm Jeff.
Hi,
Cool. Hi. I work here, so that's why I'm
He's the doorman.
guardian, yeah, the doorman.
Cool.
Doorman, elevator attendant, whatever else you want to call it.
Is that what you do during the day here too?
No, absolutely, yeah. I got like a fancy, like, hotel, a doorman kind of suit.
Yeah, the dental hop.
He works for tips, okay? Be generous.
I was originally a developer here, but now I'm a director of engineering, so
Oh, wow.
All right.
don't really write code anymore.
And I'm going to
Do you
just
miss it?
do quick introductions,
Yeah.
or introduction to the meetup. I'm gonna start. Sorry to cut you off there.
Nope.
I should have waited a minute. Sorry, I'm a rude person. All right, so everybody, welcome out to the Utah Node.js meetup. A couple of people to thank tonight. First of all, Christian for coming to present. 0th of all, Jeff for providing us a space to meet here at Vivint. I also wanted to mention to anybody that is looking to take on some additional work for a relatively good pay, if you don't mind getting paid in a digital currency, I am doing some work with a group called the Dash Incubator, and they pay people in the Dash digital currency. They don't use the C word because they are about different values than the BC type of values, but they are a digital currency group. And so anyway, if you know how to, if you could write a function that can traverse a JSON object and print out all of its values recursively and hit an API call, then you are probably at a level that we could use you on a variety of tasks. So get in touch with me or leave a comment if you're online. For those of you that are listening in online, if at any point what this great man has to tell you is useful or entertaining or helps you go to sleep, consider giving it a thumbs up and sub if you want to have more of this kind of content from the Utah JS group. And if you're on Twitch, then you can follow and you'll get all my content unfiltered. With that said, I'll turn the time over So Christian, thank you for being here to teach us about array methods.
You are very welcome. I'm excited to be here. People have told me that this presentation also works to cure insomnia, so some of you will gain a different benefit than others. But I want to talk about array methods. But first, I want to talk about why they matter, why they are important. There have been interview questions where they have asked about array methods. So array method, to broadly define, is usually you have your array dot and then you have the method and you can manipulate the data. I consider these masters of data. Another question is their functionality. Allowing you to manipulate data, they are perfect for that. And there's a lot of things, it's going to save you a lot of time. They're often they're easy to read. They can be often they are elegant if done right. They can be very elegant, and they're less verbose than doing a for loop or making something on your own. Also, the great thing about it is sometimes you're going to be looking over legacy code, and you're going to see these array methods. Also, I think they're fun and a lot of fun to use. And I've been, as I'm presenting, at any point, if you have a question, comment, just go ahead and interrupt me. And whether you're here physically or whether you're on
The YouTubes and
on
the
YouTube.
Twitches.
Yes. Yes, we definitely want to hear from you. Your input makes these presentations better. So let's get started. So one thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to avoid contrived examples.
Impossible.
It is impossible. So for the majority of the time, I'm going to use examples that I've used at my job. I work at Tyler Tech. We are hiring it if that's something you're interested in. We can talk about that later. So let's go ahead and get started. So you work for an e-commerce site that sells these novelty T-shirts, and what they want you to do is dynamically populate the size of the T-shirts. You see on the bottom where it says shirt size. They want the default value to be blank. Now we don't know ahead of time what shirt sizes are going to be available. So what we want is we want to make sure that the code is filtering out only what's there for us, or only what's there for the customer to buy. So the customer doesn't try to buy a shirt size that's not available or doesn't exist. All right. So the first thing we do is we query the data, and then we automatically learn our first important lesson. Does anybody see what's wrong with the data?
It's got nulls.
Exactly. Rule number 1, never ever trust the client's data. I don't care who the client is or how much they assert you. Don't do it. You're going to get burned every time. So if you look on index 1 and on index 3 and index 5, null values. We can't populate our drop down with that. That's not going to work. So we're going to have to figure out a way to filter those out. But JavaScript has this covered with the filter. So the filter method, it takes the array and .filter, and then it takes a function. And that function, the first value is current value. Think of it like iterating through the function. That this current value is required. Index is what index you're going through. This is optional. Array, like what array you want to put into the function, this is also optional. This value, what this keyword is going to point to. This is value. I'll be honest. I rarely use index, array, and hardly ever use this value. I just want you to know that it's there. So the first thing you do is you create a function called filter shirt sizes. Now filter is not going to change your array. It's going to create a whole new array for you with the filter option. So filter equals shirt size. So the shirt sizes is what we're getting from the database. Remember that array with those objects that had problems with it. .filter, and the shirt size, that's the current the shirt size before the fat arrow function is the current one. Now notice what I'm doing is I'm using a function that's outside of this function, so a completely independent function. You can put it into the function, or you can put it out. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. So at the bottom it says, I'm using remove null shirt sizes, which are at the bottom. So what shirt sizes does is, if the ID is not null, it returns true if the ID is not null or the size is not null. Because what function does is, if the condition is true, it'll allow it to be in the new array. If it's false, then it's going to filter it out. So that's what we're doing. So we're filtering it out and we're console logging it, and you see at the bottom all the blank IDs and all the blank sizes gone. So this is super easy and super fast. And if you wanted to, you could just stuck it right in there. But I decided to put it out because I want to show you the versatility of this particular array method. So any questions, concerns? Everything making sense? All right.
Give
perfect.
them 30 seconds to ask a question. Because somebody's got a question. I can feel it.
Yes.
The, or,
Yes.
so it's like a truthy or falsy thing, like if it's truthy, then or like if it's falsy at all, then it just skips over that.
Exactly.
That object, basically.
So with this, what I'm using here, this type of function, this is a fat arrow function. I'm doing all on one line. So if it returns false on either one, then it's going to filter it out. That's what the or does. It's like you don't even have to put in a return keyword when you're using this fat arrow function, because it can all be on one line easy. That's why you don't see the return there. All right, let's go to the next one. So we have the, yes.
It's doing something.
What the? Oh no!
Microsoft Teams, yeah!
And-
Microsoft Teams finally booted.
And then you go to Microsoft Teams because you're stuck on your code, and you code. You do pair, okay, you do pair coding. All right, perfect. So the next thing, we can't populate our drop-down menu with objects. It doesn't work that way. So we want to convert it into HTML tags, so we can populate it. So that's where map comes in. So map. Remember, what map does is it takes an array and it doesn't change that array, but it creates a new array and it changes each element according to whatever you put in there. So, for example, in map, it takes in a function, current value, like the current value, like you're iterating through it, that is required. And then index, that's what index and what array. So if you want to put an array that is used by the function and this value, whatever this points to. So it's exactly the same parameters that are filter used. So we create a function called convert to tags. We take our shirt sizes, which is the array where we filtered out all the blank stuff, and we do tags. And we create a new array called tags equals shirt sizes.map, and shirt size is the current value. And then what I'm doing here is, notice I'm not using an external function, because you can do it right in there. Because I figured it's one line, simple, and I'm using string interpolation. That's what those tick marks do. Is that what they're called?
Backticks?
Backticks. I'm sorry, backticks. Yes, this is, yes. So that's what you see. So the string, I'm doing the string literal, these backticks to insert the ID as the value and the shirt size as the name within the option. And then we look at the bottom because we're not creating a new one. We're not changing our array. We're creating a new array and altering each one. So we look at the bottom, and our array is now a bunch of tags, which we can go ahead and insert. But Christian, being the absent-minded individual, forgot something important. Our boss wants us to make sure that the first value is blank, and that be the default value. Wah, wah, wah. But before we get to that, any questions, concerns? Yes.
So I, being the totally legitimate eBay seller that I am, decided that I want my size value to be open bracket, script, alert, gotcha, pwned sucker, close script.
Why would you want to do that?
Because I just saw your code, and now I want to let all of your users know that I've got their credit cards.
Well, cybersecurity is something important. I don't know too much about it. But
What I'm saying is, with this right here, if you insert that into the HTML, then
Yeah.
whoever has the ability to populate a shirt size also has the ability to grab the credit card of the user because they can insert arbitrary script.
How can you block that? Like, how could you rewrite it?
Well, one thing you could do is, I've had this problem before, and this is kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about.
It is. Don't let me derail you if that's not where you're going to go. I just want people to know this is a very unsafe thing to do. It makes a cute example, but you will get listed on haveibeenpwned.com if you do this.
All right. So yeah, that's kind of outside the scope, and and what I've done in the past, just to go over it, is in the back end, I make sure if I'm taking values up, that I'm into the SQL server, that I'm using usually Java to get rid of all different types of tags, because people can insert like a script on another site that inserts malicious code, or that certain types of filters that only put in what I want. Like, for example, with MySQL, you can create enums where you can only insert like certain values that you want. That's a little bit off scope, but hopefully, if we want to address this a little bit later, we can come back to this, because I'm hoping that towards the end of the presentation we have a broad discussion. So remember, getting back to where I was, looking at the array, I forgot the blank tag that's supposed to be first. Never fear, these JavaScript array methods have got me covered. So there's two ways to do this. We can use unshift. So unshift is now what it does is it changes the actual array. It doesn't create a new array, and it'll put as many items as you want in front of the array at the beginning. That's what unshift does. Very useful. Or we can use splice, and splice is often misunderstood. So splice also does the same thing. It's called what we call in place, meaning it changes the actual array instead of creating a new array. So first, it takes in the index. That means where we want to start inserting values. And where it says how many to replace, if you put 0, it's not going to replace anything. But if you put a number higher than that, then it's going to start replacing those values. And after that, notice how it says item 1, item X. You can put as many items in there as you want. Just pack it in. And you can insert all those wherever you want. So notice I'm using the easy one, shirt size.unshift, and I'm inserting a blank value. Or I can do shirt sizes.splice 0, because I want to insert at the 0. And after that, it's comma 0, because I don't want to replace anything. We're just inserting. If I put a number, it's going to start replacing, and then the value I'm inserting. And if we look at the bottom, now our array is exactly like we want it. It's the first blank and default. So we can go on to our next step, but the array we still haven't inserted into our into the actual HTML, which we're going to get into in a moment. So any questions, concerns? All right, perfect. Another thing we can do is, let's say we wanted to put it at the end of the array. We could use, I'm sorry, I had to use a contrived example. I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum. So we can use Array.push. This is also in place, meaning it changes the array, it doesn't create a new one, and we can push as many items as we want in there. So for example, let's say we have a test array 1, 2, 3. We do push 4, and then we console log the array. Now we have a new element in there, number 4, when we console log it out. And this is that push is actually very common. So if you don't know this, I suggest you use this because it's very, you often use it.
Does push create like a new array or does it modify the old one?
It modifies the old one, just like the other two. Just to be clear, so let's go back. So filter, map, reduce. They create new arrays or something new. The splice, unshift, push. They modify the old array. So let's go ahead and go get that into our HTML. All right, so here we have for each. For each is so cool. For each is like an array, but it's like a for loop. For each is a for loop, but it's less verbose. So just like just like map, it takes in the exact same parameter. It takes in a function, the current value, which is required. Index, I mean that's the index, the current index, optional, array, optional, this value, that's optional. And so what we're doing is we're taking the shirt sizes, we're doing for each, so think of it as we're looping through it. And each shirt size, we're using jQuery to append it to the ID shirts, which is our drop-down menu, and we're doing append. So we're appending each one, and look at the bottom. We just appended all our shirt sizes with that simple line, with one line of code.
So we do have a question in from online.
Yes.
The alarm asks, is there an easy way to remember which methods will change the array and which ones wouldn't?
You know, unfortunately, there's not, other than just getting used to them and practicing them and just experimenting. That's how I came across it and reading the documentation. Fortunately, there's some really great documentation out there. JavaScript has a great community, and there's not a way just by glancing at it to say, oh, that's going to mutate it. That's not.
So the one thing that I would add that I think is helpful is, generally speaking, if it returns an array, so if you were to console.log the value of it, if it returns an array, usually that is not modifying the original. And if it does not return an array, then that is not meant to modify the original. The exception to that being splice. But for example, for each does not return the array. Am I right about that?
It does not return the array.
Yeah.
This is just like a for loop. A for loop doesn't return an array. It just loops through.
Yeah, because there's no chaining on that. That said, no matter which method you use, you can change the array inside in your function, which is a
if
thing
you want
to be aware
to.
of.
Yes, you are able to do that if you want. For example, let's say you did index and you used the array. So you said array at index equals whatever, and you set it to whatever value. You can do that, but as it stands, that's not exactly what it's designed to do. But it gives you the option to do that if you're so inclined.
I hate to admit it, but I use for each a lot because when you're writing JavaScript scripts to execute in the MongoDB console, it actually works around a lot of problems.
Why do you hate to admit using for each?
The code ends up being pretty ugly, but basically how you do joins in a database that doesn't do joins.
Well, it
Okay.
can be ugly. So who has a suggestion to make for each less ugly? Because you see all those parameters. How can we solve the problem?
So, well, I was gonna ask, do you think you can, I mean, because the arrow syntax can kind of, does everybody understand the arrow syntax areas? So I was just wondering, like, what would it look like if you had to use function?
Okay, so if you didn't use the arrow function, you would write dot for each. Well, let me show you.
Yeah, open up a gist or something.
I'm going to open up a compiler really quickly.
I think one of the things that can be overlooked is that the arrow function is actually returning
Yeah,
Something,
even though
right?
it doesn't say return.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let me go ahead and open up my JavaScript right here. All right. So
You said like fat arrow. not the-
fat arrow function.
Wait,
So
Because arrow-
let
arrow-
test
arrow-
equals
Just the arrow.
1, 2, 3. So let's say you didn't want to use the fat arrow function, but you wanted to iterate it through. So you do 4.
Hold on just one second. Hold on just one
Single
second.
line arrow.
What was the question?
The question was, if you were in an interview and you were reading the arrow part, like out loud, how would you say arrow? Would you just say arrow, or would you say is defined as a function to be? Or like, what would be the lingo if you were saying that out loud? Does that make sense?
That's a good question.
All right. So you would just say, I guess you could just say, quote, fat arrow, fat arrow. You could just say fat arrow, and they would understand what you mean. You don't have to say equals chevron. They should understand what you mean. So let's say you don't want to use the fat arrow function because maybe you're working on an older browser and you want to do it. So this is how you do a for each. So for each dot function equals val and console log the val. So let's run this, and it works.
Did you make that bigger?
Let me see. Okay, one second. Let me.
And this is,
Or I guess maybe a better question would be, how would you do it for filter?
Same thing.
For the return value.
Or well, let's go ahead and I'll show you. So I'll show you how to do it for filter because we can do something very similar. So can you guys see it now that I've expanded the size? Because it was kind of small. So let me go over what I did. For each function val, which is the current value, a console log the val. And if we look at the, if we go down here, we see it returns 1, 2, 3. All right. So now let's answer the question, what if we wanted to do with a filter? All right. So let's try this. So remember, it's going to create a new one. So let test 2 equals, and let's return val is greater than 1. And then we're going to console log. By the way, this is what I'm doing here is very dangerous. Doing live coding in the middle of a presentation. This could really work well or really make me look stupid. All right. So does everyone understand what I'm doing so far? So for each, I'm looping through, and if the val is greater than 0, keep it. If it's not greater than 0, then filter it out.
You were going to replace for each with filter, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. See, this is why I'm doing this incredibly dangerous, and it can make you look incredibly stupid. Thank you.
it's better to look stupid than to have code that doesn't work.
Got it. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff saved me. So you see what I'm doing? Now you can put an if statement if you want in there, but I'm doing it shorthand. That's just kind of my thing, to do things shorthand.
Is return necessary there? Like since you only have the one statement on it?
Well, I believe it is because we're doing a function
Yeah.
and not a fat arrow, but let's find out. Let's experiment. What's going to happen if I don't do a return statement? Yep, so it is necessary.
Yeah, the fat arrow function was introduced by the Ruby kids, and they hate JavaScript and they like implicit returns, so they wanted to make your life more miserable. And I don't know what kind of horse trading they did, but they got it into the spec somehow.
I would assume you can, but can you make the function there be asynchronous and use a weight inside of it, right?
Well, I have not experimented with that. Can
Okay.
anyone speak to that?
What was the question?
Can you make the function, like put async before it? So you can
Yeah.
use the await keyword inside.
I've honestly not tried that, but
So, if you want to, it wouldn't make sense with a filter, but no, you can't. What will happen if you create an async function? So it's really important to understand promises.
Yeah, it returns a promise, right?
All async functions is promises. So When the interpreter reads through the code and it sees async, then it just creates a new promise inside, and that is what your function is. And then it puts in some resolves and stuff. But your code is just simply rewritten. So there's many tricks that JavaScript has where it'll rewrite your code, and that's what async does, is it rewrites your code with a promise. So if you were to think about what this would be doing, if it returned a promise to the filter method, then a promise would be truthy. It would not be falsy, because a promise is not null or undefined or false or zero.
So it'll just return everything back.
So what would be really
The
weird?
syntax is you can do it, it just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't do anything useful, and what you'd end up with would be a bunch of dangling promises that if they throw an exception, there would be no way to catch them, which could cause your program to crash if it's Node v14 or lower, or in the browser, it might actually just be silent depending on the browser. You might not get no indication that anything went wrong at all. I think that they've fixed that recently, but I haven't tested that. But that's the way that in the spec, it was defined, do whatever you want when there's an error. And so for a while, at least, there were no errors. And then what you would get back on the filter on the other end, you would get an exact copy of whatever you put in.
Right.
Now, one method that you can use, or you might say abuse, to do this is reduce. Reduce will take the previous value and combine that with the next value. So using reduce, you could await something reduce and then have it resolve the promises, and then the next line, what you would end up with, your test 2, would end up being your array of resolved things, and then you could call your dot filter on that afterwards. So may I
Go ahead.
just show
Yes,
this
please.
real quick, because this is a little bit easier to show than to try to word it out.
So put await before the reduce.
Yeah, so if you wanted to do this, if you had something you wanted to get to values, you could use promise.all or reduce, but I'm going to say that you actually probably would want to use reduce most of the time, because most of the time whatever you're going to do, say you want to read from a file system and you have 500 files you want to read, you don't actually want to read all 500 at once. Likewise, if you need to make web requests in the browser, you don't actually want to make all 200 requests for a profile photo at once. So there's a little bit of nuance to it, but just to show you what this might look like.
Yeah, like await something.
So this would be,
Like AB, and then you would return A plus B.
so I'm going to put P for promise just because I can't type well on other people's keyboards. So it would look like this. Yeah, and then here you would do, say, await val, which, and then at this point you could do your filter function, which I won't undo to do that. But then you could say, test3 equals test2.
Test 2 dot filter, right?
Right. What you could not do is you could not do dot filter here, and the reason for that is that you actually would be returning a promise, not an array, and then you'd be calling dot filter on the promise, which doesn't exist. So this is the method that I use. Some people prefer the for async syntax, but this is actually what I prefer because I think it lends itself better to async code and the mental model of async code. Whereas a for loop often, I think people don't quite get what asyncs are doing. Anyway,
Cool.
So along this line, do we have any more questions about what we've talked about this one? Because this is a good discussion, and I don't want to kill the momentum.
What's the purpose of promise.resolve at the end?
oh, reduce is a little bit weird. It's actually two separate operations of function. If you don't pass in the promise.resolve, it may or may not work as expected because it will use the very first val as the first promise. So it's, if you don't pass in an additional parameter, it'll shift the first item off the array and use that as the initial parameter. And so then you end up with an off by one error because 59 of your 60 things are done the way that you think they should, and then the first one might get skipped. So, in the case of math, if you were to take an array of numbers, so exactly this, 1, 2, 3, and you were to just say the first argument, which I guess you can't see there because it's kind of covered up by the other thing. But, oh wait, I might have typed that in wrong because I was on somebody else's keyboard. But if it was just numbers, it doesn't matter whether you pass in a 0 as the last argument or whether it uses the first number as the first argument, because associative property, you'll end up with the same number. Well, and just adding 0 to a number gives you the same number. But I don't suggest using reduce that way because it's error prone, because you'll end up creating an off by one error for yourself at some point. This actually should say await P and then return await val. By the way, I messed that up, just so everybody knows. So it should have line 4 await P, then line 5 return await val.
That's good stuff. I learned something new too. All right. So now that we finished that, let's look at another scenario which I'm really excited to talk about. So at your job, employees must submit a daily report. And there are several types of users. There's admins, managers, assistant managers, employees. Now, only managers and assistant managers should be able to edit the manager option. That's this drop down at the top. No one else should be allowed to do that. So if you're one of those, if you're a user type manager or user type assistant manager, you can edit it. Otherwise, it should be disallowed. How can we do that? Well, I've done something very similar at work. So we can use the includes function. Now what the includes function does is it takes in a search value, that's what you're looking for in the array, and it returns a boolean, true or false. And the start index, that's completely optional. That's only if you want to. If you just leave that blank, then it's going to start searching at index 0 to the end. Otherwise, you can say start searching at 1 or 2 or wherever you want. So we create a function called disable manager, and we create an array of authorized user types, manager and assistant manager, and then we create a boolean. So an if statement. So if authorized user types include current user, which let's just say for the sake of it, the discussion, that the current user is a global variable that we're getting from the back end. And if that's true, then we're going to do return. So what return does is, let's say current user is in that array, return is just going to kill the function, end, stop, right there. And don't go any further. Otherwise, it's going to go to the last line of the function and disable the manager. So in this case, the person who logged in is obviously not a manager or assistant manager. Let's say that it's just a regular employee. So we're not going to allow them to do it. But there's another way to do this, which is very helpful, and that is index of. So index of, it takes in the search value and it returns what index is in there. Now, if that search value does not exist within the array, it returns a -1. Also, we can, same thing, the start index is where we start looking. You can put whatever you want there, and it'll start looking there. That is optional. If you just leave that blank, it's going to start searching at 0. So same function, disable manager, same authorized user types function. So if authorized user index of is not the current user, so remember in this case it's going to be an employee user type. If it's not index -1, because index -1 means it's not in there, then we're going to return. stop the function, stop the show. And otherwise, we're going to go to the last line and disable it. So these are two ways that we can search our array for values. In this case, we're searching for an index. And this is something that's very useful. All right.
You'll see the index of a lot in older code because most of the time if you're writing newer code, usually, unless you need that start index parameter, you're going to be using either find or what he was showing before with includes.
That's correct. I mean, this is where it gets back to being able to understand our legacy code. Because at some point in your career, you're going to be asked to look at it, at least to understand it. Sometimes you'll be asked to edit it. So at this point, as far as index of or contains, do you have any questions? Clear as mud?
They do the same thing, right? But just different ways of writing it.
Well, one returns a boolean and another one returns an integer.
Right, yeah.
That's the difference. So let's go back 1 second. This includes, either it includes it or it doesn't. True, false. And this one, index of, it's going to return what the index of that item is, not the actual item itself, so it's going to return an integer, or it's going to return a -1. Either or.
Do you know how you would check if it includes a certain type, like a string or a number? Like how would you say this array.includes a number type?
Well, you might have to create a, you might have to create some custom code for that. Off the top of my head, you could iterate through it and do type of. So let's say you search the whole thing, and if one of the items is type of equals string, then you return a true. Otherwise, if you loop through the whole thing and you don't find it, then you would return false. But I don't think there's already an array method for that.
Yeah,
So that's
you can't do that with includes.
You could use find, and then just like he said, function return number equals triple equals type of value.
Yeah.
Now, my question to you would be, why would you want to do something like that? Because that sounds like there was an error upstream in the code. Somewhere else in the code, some bad values got in your array.
Yeah, reason was just to make the question difficult.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah, well, no, because there are legitimate cases for that, but they're few and far between, and that's why I'm saying, if you encounter that situation, sometimes it's better to ask the question, wait, why do I want to solve this problem? Is it because I'm getting bad data, or is it because something in the system upstream from me has got a bug in it?
right.
And also, who remembers lesson number 1 about the client's data?
Trust it.
Don't trust, verify.
Yes, trust.
Don't trust it.
Verify, don't trust. Yes, that's exactly true. Never. All right. So I have to use another contrived example because slice and splice are often confused because they both start with S and they sound similar, but they're not the same. So let's talk about Array.slice. So what Array.slice, it's going to return a whole new array. So in this case, you're going to put where you want to start and where you want to end. So it's going to take a chunk of that array. So let's look at the first example. So we have test array equals 0, 1, 2, 3. We do array.slice 1 and 2, and we get the array 1 and 2. So what I'm doing is this slice is not going to change your array. It's going to return a whole new array, depending on what the start and index is. Make sense so far? Or is
Yes.
it confusing? All right. And splice is what we did before. This, what this does, this mutates the array. The current old array changes it. Unlike slice. So first, it's going to take the index where you want to start inserting into the array, and how many items you want to replace. If you put 0, then it's not going to replace anything. It's just going to insert. And then you can put as many items you want to insert as you want. You can do 1, you can do 1,000, whatever you want. And then, so for example, on the bottom example, test array 0, 1, 2, 2, 3, and test array.splice. So we're going to insert at 4, that's the first number. It's 0 because we don't want to replace anything, we just want to insert. And then we're going to insert values 4 and 5. And then we print it out, and then we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to our array. All right, questions, comments? Yes.
Why in the world would splice ever be useful?
Well, maybe what you're doing is you're creating a special type of sort algorithm that, like, you have to sort objects, and you want to put it into the into a particular array. Now, I'll be honest. One of the reasons I had to use a contrived example, you're asking about slice or splice?
Splice. I know
Splice.
a lot of reasons slice is useful,
Okay.
but splice is not. I was also fishing for something in particular.
Well, I'm sorry. So one thing that splice is useful is if you want to mutate a current array instead of having to create a whole new array and replace that array. So like that's just one way to do it. Besides shift and push, unshift and push.
The thing that you'll come across on a fairly regular basis is splice is actually how you remove something from an array.
Yep. That's also good use for it.
I can count on one hand in 10 years how many times I've used splice to add something to an array in some weird position, which has been, I don't know, probably not the full hand. But JavaScript arrays don't have a remove method, and if you don't specify what to insert and you specify the index to remove, that's how you remove something.
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't even thought of that. So, yes.
So if you were removing something, that first argument would be as, let's say you wanted to remove the second index. You have 2 for the index. How many to replace?
Well, let's
0.
go ahead and try it out. So let's go ahead and.
I feel like I kind of hate splice because it feels like it's like 3 functions, but they made it 1 function by just adding a bunch of parameters. Like it seems like it's insert, replace, and remove.
So which
So like we can make it 1 function if we just add a bunch of parameters to it.
So 2.
you want to remove 2, right? Okay, so we're going to start at 2. So 2 is in the first index, and we want to remove 1 and
The name works.
Oh, so you don't need a third argument passed to it.
if AJ is correct, then we don't.
Yeah, you know.
There you go. You remove 2.
Okay. Wow.
See, super easy.
Yeah. So what index is the item you want to get rid of, and how many items? This is really weird. It's like Jeff said. And the strange thing to me is that in all of the past, what has it been, 20 years that we've been adding, now we have super redundant methods like reduce write, which is just .reverse .reduce and stuff like that. We still don't have something that, because there's not a person in this room that doesn't have to look up that documentation every friggin' time they use this. This is pretty much a Twitter meme of what's one thing in JavaScript. You know, people who've been programming in JavaScript over 10 years, what's one thing you still have to look up every single time you look up, you use it? It is this. So,
And
I
how to
don't-
use tar.
what?
And how to use tar.
Oh. XD.
Well, that doesn't count within the realm of JavaScript, but sure. I have seen that.
I would look this up, and you know, sometimes these array methods are complicated, and you have to look them up. But when I'm teaching people how to code, I say don't bother memorizing everything. Just know where to look and know how to search. Know the art of Google foo or YouTube foo. It is powerful.
And keep a cheat sheet.
Yeah.
You know, if you do something copy and paste the 3 lines, put a header on it, you know, put it either in a blog or a gist or a repo. Keep a cheat sheet of stuff.
It can be very helpful. All right.
This is on my cheat sheet, by the way.
So, if you feel like you haven't memorized it, it's okay. He's got lots of years of experience. All right.
And I have not memorized it.
Let's concat. I think concat is often misunderstood. It's often confused with push. It's not the same thing. So what concat does is, yes, you can use it to add values onto your array, into an array. However, it is not in place. It doesn't mutate or change the old array. It creates a whole new array with those values combined. So in this example, what I'm doing is, with concat, you can put as many values as you want and put it on your new array. In this case, like array1 and array2, and I'm setting array1 equals array1.concat array2, and then I'm console logging it. See, I'm merging it. But I have to create a whole new one. And the only reason I included this is because, like I said, I've confused it with push. Yes?
Okay, wait, would this be similar to like the spread operator? Is that what the spread operator is actually doing, like doing concat?
Yes, and I'm going to get to that. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's a segue into my next thing. Because I love that question. And we're going to get to that. Any other questions about concat? Yes? Comments?
Am I thinking of another language, or can you do array plus array?
You can do it in Python.
Okay.
You cannot do that in Java. That is JavaScript. That is
Okay.
that is a no-no. And not in Java. Well, in Java, everything's a no, pretty much.
Yes.
Wait, what would
That is
happen-
true.
What would happen here if you added the 2 arrays?
Well, let's find out.
So I just did it and you get an empty string.
So,
Well,
I feel like this
Translators.
is, if anyone hasn't seen the Watt video, WAT,
With the,
I think you should watch it,
Yeah.
because there's some pretty good examples of things you can try to do in JavaScript that give interesting results.
Array plus
So
array.
Like,
test.
I believe empty object plus empty
So
object
if
is in
you-
fact not a number, because that's what you get out of it, if I recall. At least it was in the
It
background.
turns into a string.
Yeah, that's what I
All
thought.
separate.
all right, let's see what happens.
So weird.
A plus, like a space, like
It turns into a string.
lowercase or something.
I don't think that's what we meant to do, is it?
Yeah,
No.
It's like, I wonder how many people actually use this. You know,
And then you know there's somebody that's
Use what?
doing
I said how many people actually use the plus operator on arrays?
Oh, nah. Nah.
You could overload the operator, right?
Well, that'd be cool.
Get out. Get out.
Let's see what-
You're just trying to piss me off. And it's working.
You know that there's gonna somebody that's gonna be doing this, and then they're gonna be .join. No, don't do that. That's just redundant and unnecessary. There's much better ways to do this. Because my man over here mentioned the spread operator, and that makes me happy. But before we get to that, any other questions?
Please don't tell people how to abuse the spread operator and make it do weird, strange things that you'd only know if you were a JavaScript developer and into weird, strange things.
All right. So let's say.
No! Our only weakness!
What do you say? All right. So I had to figure out a contrived out
Hey, you
thing.
gotta drive me home, so just.
So
don't
let's
worry
say
right now.
I was once asked in an interview, how do you clone an object? And it's the same way you would clone an array. So let's say you wanted to clone array1, which is ABC. Don't do this. Don't say let array2 equals array1. How come this is not going to work?
You forgot .slice.
Is this because it'll be a reference to it?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just pointing to array1. So, but what you can do is say array2 equals, and this is the spread operator, ... array1. And it becomes a clone of array1. You can also do this with objects, because that was the question. So
Object.assign would be this more standard way to make a copy of an object into a new object.
You can do that
turn it
too.
to like a JSON string, and then can you like turn it to a JSON string and then like to make a copy of an object?
So turn it into a string and then
Parse it.
and then parse it out.
Yeah.
I suppose that's one way to do it, but it's kind of like the long way around.
Well, that will give you a deep clone if you don't have any circular references.
Yeah, because like I'm pretty that doesn't work if you have like really nested stuff.
Well, if it's not even really nested stuff, it's if there are any non-primitive values in your array. So primitives are things such as numbers or strings or Boolean. So if you have any non-primitive value, anything that is of type object, that could be a regular expression, it could be an array, it could be an object, it could be a class instance. If you have anything that is not a primitive value, then this will give you a new reference. So you'll have a different array or a different object, but any mutation in either array or object will be reflected in the other array or object.
So any questions about the spread operator, because it is powerful.
So the spread operator is the ellipsis, or the 3 periods.
Exactly.
Correct?
That's what the spread operator is.
It's not 2, it's not 4, it's not 6, it's exactly 3.
Exactly 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it won't work.
And this is common in other languages. Usually it's on the other side because it's saying that it is expanding from the beginning to the end. I don't know why JavaScript does it this way. In most other languages, when you see the dots on this side, what it means is it's collecting from one side to the other. So if expanding is dots on the on the right side, and collecting is dots on the inner side. But JavaScript has got too many cooks in the kitchen.
That does make sense though when it's used as a parameter inside a function, right? Because it's, I think it's called like rest parameter or something like that. Yeah. It means,
Like everything in between.
infinite parameters. Yeah. But this obviously isn't that. So.
I want to use the other example here that we were talking about, but in a not bad way. So let's do test1 dot push spread operator test2 and then see what we get. Now we can merge it in place. There's so many cool things you can do with the spread operator. You can use it with min, max. It is awesome.
So it mutates the array?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's exactly what we did.
Push adds items to the array. So push can accept any number of arguments. So essentially, what would be idiomatic and clear would be to use concat in this situation, because it's clever and it's cool, but cool by definition means something that is unintuitive and not obvious to the other person. So if you did concat here, that means join two things together. Push is very rarely ever used with multiple elements. You'll hardly ever see that in code, but you can use it with multiple elements. And so what this is doing is it's replacing test2. Think of it as the interpreter is going to rewrite the code. It's going to come to test2 and it's going to rip that out and it's going to replace it with 4, 5, and 6. So the behavior is exactly the same as concat.
And if we didn't do the spread operator, then things get weird.
Oh, it's an array instead of.
Right.
It becomes a multi-dimensional array.
Right, but if you just put concat there, then it does as documented.
So obviously this is something a little bit more controversial than I expected, which is good. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions about spread operators?
Yeah, so in your other example, you had everything wrapped inside of brackets, but in the push example, you didn't. So yeah, if you go back to your other slide real quick.
The other side. Okay, this one right here.
Yeah, so you see you have ... array1 that's inside brackets.
Mm-hmm.
So what if inside of .push you also wrapped it in brackets? Does that make sense? So go back to your code now.
All right, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. So if we did
Yeah,
this,
yeah, that right there.
dot, 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 and then we wrapped it within an array?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's find out what happens. See what it's gonna do.
Same thing.
Same thing.
So when the interpreter comes across it, so the interpreter's gonna come here and it's gonna pick up these values, and then it's gonna come here and it's just going to do a straight replacement. So imagine you're in a Word document, you just did find replace. It's going to take the value here and it's gonna replace it here. So it can be understood literally as a replacement of what's inside the
Yeah,
brackets.
and then just put, okay, yeah, that
So
makes
it's
sense.
kind of magic in a way.
Yes.
Magic is such a dirty word.
All right.
Is there another way to push onto the end of an array without using the function, or does it have to?
Well, the only ones I can think of is so we have splice. You can use that to push on the end of the array because you could set the value to the length -1 of the array and then not replace anything. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So we're going to do
Well, so my question was, is there a way to do it without a function?
without a function.
Yeah.
Well,
That doesn't make sense.
Like to append to an array without, like, is there an
Oh.
operator or?
Can you do equals, and then, say like in parentheses, test, and then spread and test two? Like, is that what you're saying?
so I think what he means is this. So you could do test.length equals, let's say we're going to do 45. Let's see if this works. This is what I'm thinking. And
Oh, yeah.
that's one way without creating a function. And that's all on a way to add it always to the end.
So really rare thing that hopefully you'll never encounter, but if you're in game development in the browser, maybe you will. If you want to reuse an array, you can set its length to be 0, and it will empty the array and keep the memory allocated. That's one of those cool things I recommend that no one ever do, but if you are ever in a do or die situation, you'll probably have forgotten by then.
And these are fun things that you learn by like playing around with algorithms. Right? Any other questions, concerns, heated controversies you want to bring up?
If you were to do test.length +1 in that argument, that would result in an error.
Probably.
Ooh, do it.
Let's do it.
Do it. Do it.
Let's do
Do
it.
it.
Yes. Because that's.
One empty.
I thought he was going to throw an error. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where crawling through an array to find the type of might help, right?
Well, no, because actually ForEach will skip over. Okay, so there's this thing called a sparse array, which is what you've created here. So do +999 there.
Okay, +999.
Yeah, your little website might break, but let's try it out.
It's not mine, but.
Okay, so this is what's
99
called
empty items.
a sparse array. Okay, now do a ForEach on test.
All right, so let's go over here.
On a new line 6 or a new line 7.
Test for each.
You could just pass the console log.
Yes, you can pass in whatever you want.
Well, no, I mean like
Look.
2 for each. You just do for each and then console.log.
So, again, these are things where it pains me to talk about this sort of stuff because there's lots of interesting things that can happen, but it's kind of interesting in the way that splattering paint on your kitchen floor is interesting. It's not something you should intend to do, but if it happens by accident, you could maybe admire the pattern it makes, right? JavaScript arrays are what are called sparse arrays. So if there is not a defined value, which is really weird, there are 3 types, well, there's 10 types of nothing in JavaScript, but the 3 most common ones are not defined, undefined, and null. And many people will get undefined and not defined confused, because when you console.log them, they both print undefined, but they are in fact distinct, not distinct values, but I don't know what the right word is to describe them, but they are distinct. There's a difference between not defined and undefined. Undefined is a value that can be stored. Not defined is when a value isn't stored. So with this sparse array, no value was stored in between 3 and 45. So it's not simply a matter of the value is undefined. There really isn't any value there at all. And so in a sparse array in JavaScript, I don't know why this is, I don't know the rationale or why it's useful, but a sparse array will skip values that do not exist rather than printing undefined. Now, let's try this and just see, would you mind changing that 45 to the word undefined? Because I don't recall how this works. And again, this is not something that's useful. This is the kind of thing where when there's a weird bug in the code, it's helpful to know that somebody might have done this. But see there? That's the difference between a value that is not defined and the specific value which is undefined.
Sorry, AJ, for saying this, but can you assign something to undefined?
Oh, please, 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 you're giving me diarrhea. I'm going to have to leave.
Can you do like undefined equals 1?
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
So,
Go ahead.
Can you do it?
Go ahead.
so are you saying
Do it
like
on line 4. Do it on line 4. Do it on line 4.
test
Can somebody hold me?
let test 3 equals undefined, and then you want
No,
me
no,
to-
no, no. Let undefined equal 3.
No, not even let, just undefined equals 3.
undefined equals 3. Now,
I have a feeling that it's not going to work because of the way this website is.
yeah.
Okay, it didn't work because of the way this website is. If you actually run this in JavaScript code, you will redefine undefined.
Wow.
And then undefined becomes the value 3.
I did not know that.
Then I have to take some Robitussin.
So we're talking about some really arcane things, but
Oh, and we got a question in from Twitch.
yes.
And I don't. This was maybe a couple minutes ago. What is it? This was 3 minutes ago. So who knows what line 5 was 3 minutes ago? But I think he was asking what was happening when we were adding to the length.
By adding to the length.
So I think. So what used to be there at the very beginning was test, and then open brackets test.length equals 45, or equals 3, or equals whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's what was originally there. And what you were doing was Will asked the question, can we do this without a function? And you answered by saying, yes, we can just increment the array by its length, because the length will always be one more than the current last index. So if the length is 5, that means the indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So index 5 would be a new index 5. So if you're doing test, in brackets, test.length in this example would be 3, but the indexes that are used are only 0, 1, and 2. And so when you add index 3 to test, you are expanding the array's length. Again, these are things that they're useful to know to spot bad code and bugs, but it's not useful to write programs in this way. There might be a really rare exception where you're targeting a specific browser. Say that you know that this thing has to run in Firefox version 67, and you have a specific client that you have a 5-year contract with, and they have a very specific niche need, and you found out on a mailing list that if you use the accessor like this, there's a bug in the compiler that will cause it to deallocate memory faster or trip the garbage collector. Like, this is the kind of really nasty stuff that you use this for because there's something really, really weird that you're trying to take advantage of. This is not a way to write code that you want to go through a code review. This specific thing here.
Do you have a question?
Oh, no,
Sure. Okay.
I was gonna say, can you reassign true to false and false to true?
You're gonna kill this man.
Yeah, I'm just.
Well,
Somebody have some
Yeah,
advice.
but once you assign true to false, then false to true won't work because you just redefined true.
Well, thankfully, you cannot redefine true and false.
Okay.
For some reason, those are keywords, but undefined is not a keyword. Also, let is Schrodinger's keyword.
so as we're on this topic, some of you are asking, like, why are we talking about these arcane things? One, you mentioned to recognize when someone does bad code to fix bugs. But at some point, you're going to go through a code interview, and they're going to ask you some obscure coding questions because they can, and they need to do something, and you'll be ready.
Or you can tell them, no, thank you, I'd like to work somewhere where I'm going to learn how to advance my career and prepare me for other opportunities that I would like in the future.
It's one option, yeah.
People may ask you weird questions in a code interview just to test your knowledge, just to see, what the breadth of your experience is. But you're not going to fail a code interview because you don't know how to use a bug in the language in a way that it wasn't intended to be used.
Not at that. All right. Any other questions about this rabbit hole comments? Because I'm enjoying this.
Thanks for going over the ellipsis. That was good.
That is cool. I love the ellipsis. All right. So, in conclusion, this is by no means a comprehensive list. You're gonna have to look into it on your own. You're gonna get more comfortable with these array methods by practicing them on your own. Practice makes perfect. I mean, I can talk at you all day, but until you get your hands dirty, that's when the learning really happens. And just experiment and have fun. I mean, by doing these weird things, I know, and we were giving AJ an aneurysm, but I was really enjoying it. Not because he was having an aneurysm.
Oh, don't be modest now.
Because I am enamored with code. I love to see what, for me, I know you don't like the N-word magical, but for me, it's something wondrous. And MDMN has a great list of methods. Their documentation is a little bit obscure and a little weird, but
W3 Schools does have good stuff these days.
they do, yes.
I used to be a W3 Schools hater. I was on the hater bus. I was shouting profanities from the window at passersby. But they cleaned up their act. They got better. And if there's one thing that you got to allow people and organizations is forgiveness.
Yes.
They've repented of their transgressions. They've done well. W3 Schools has my thumbs up.
Yes.
Or did you just come to the light?
No, they really did clean things up because they used to have terrible examples. MDN and W3 Schools basically swapped places, but differently. W3 Schools examples used to be so stupid that even a novice coder would recognize this is not how you do it. W3 Schools would have had to have been the first site you ever visited to think that the way they were suggesting it was the right way. And now MDN is so incomprehensible that I could never recommend somebody go there because the examples are just insane.
Well, maybe we'll show you. So let's look at W3
They
Schools.
might give you a good example for this. So W3 Schools, this makes perfect sense.
Easy. And I mean, you can just take one look at that. That's wonderful. Now let's look at MDNN.
And
MDN.
I won't be surprised if they didn't screw this one up, MDN.
I think it's this first one right here. Yeah, it's this one here. So, actually, the first one isn't too bad.
It's definitely more complicated. It's
a
less
little more.
easy to read.
And then as we get down here, it becomes kind of crazy.
Yeah, this is MDN for you. you want to know how do I use filter, and they show you, did you know about primes?
It's kind of like one of my favorite YouTubers said, if someone wants to teach you recursion and they're using the Fibonacci, the first thing you need to do is murder them. Because Fibonacci is horrible.
No, it's not. That's what the Eiffel Tower was built on.
That's what everything's built on, if you believe.
Well, and
Aliens.
I mean, if you're for a beginner, it's very difficult. to
No.
use. I find it confusing.
We got to put this to the test.
I think it. Well, I'm really bad at math.
I mean, well, it's just addition. But never mind.
Okay. But-
Fibonacci sequence, I think, is because it's one of those structures that just looks pretty when you print out the graph. Meh.
All right. Any other questions, comments about the presentation?
I'm sorry that I gave you so much crap. Sorry, not sorry, because if I was really sorry, I wouldn't have done it. But I appreciate you putting up with my crap and teaching all these people.
Hey, if there's
And
no,
me, I learned about the start at with the index of. I didn't know about that.
we're all learning important new things, and if there's no controversy and there's no passion, then we're bored. That's why I like your input, because it's always passionate, and that's important.
Oh, just because you were talking about how this meetup is the shiz because the people are cool here, and
Yeah.
and it's I was just thinking, oh, it's the controversy. That's what does it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool too.
It's useful.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I am pretty new to arrays in JavaScript, but I've done arrays in like Python and C#, so it's kind of cool to see how you can manipulate them, both in terms of functions and then just mutations. Well, a function could be a mutation, or wait, something like that. Yeah.
Well, just to clarify, what a mutation means, it means when you change an array.
Right, right.
And some of the array methods, and we're not going to memorize this, we're not going to become experts in one presentation. That's just not realistic. Some functions, they create a new function, some of them change the old array.
And the alarm says, thanks, Christian.
You're welcome.
Are we done?
Yes, we're done.
All right.
Okay, hard question for everyone. What is the largest array that you can build in JavaScript before the computer blows up? Like, what's the limit?
How much RAM do you have?
That's the question.
It's actually what is your VM max heap size set to?
Yes.
So you mean 32-bit versus 64-bit?
No, meaning when you run Node.js, you can specify on the command line how much memory it's allowed to take up in the heap.
That's the limit.
But would it be limited by the register size? Or architecture, I mean? Do you think?
Let's see.
So like if you try to use something above 4.2 billion on that 30?
I would imagine that you're either limited to 4 billion, which would make sense because you're going to run out of RAM anyway, because 4 billion bytes is 4 gigabytes, so your max heap size would have to be quite large. The reason I think it might be 4 billion is because you have a max safe int issue in JavaScript. Depends on the implementation of the array. It probably is actually engine dependent, or it's either specified in the spec, which is probably not, or it's engine dependent, meaning that if you're using JagerMonkey in Firefox versus if you're using V8 in Chrome versus if you're using Rhino in the Texas Instrument build tools, you get different implementation details. But essentially it's unlimited. You can't make an array so big. Well, you can, but it's difficult. I don't know how you would make an array so big that you couldn't hold it in memory. Because even if you just looped 4 billion times, I believe it was so hot that Jesus couldn't eat it. Oh, by the way, for those of you that are joining in online, if you did like this at all, please consider giving it a like and following Christian, except that he doesn't really do social media, so you can just, I don't know, reach out to us and we'll nag him for you. And I think he is in the Discord. I mean, I'm going to post a link to the Utah.js Discord.
I think I am on there.
Yeah, I think you are. I don't know if you ever actually joined in on it, but
No.
you've got a username there.
I mean, occasionally I post stuff on there when I do a presentation.
Yeah.
You
So
can just follow me down the street and ask me random questions.
yeah, but yeah, and then sub on YouTube if you want to get more Utah.js, and follow on Twitch if you want to get more of my obnoxious self, which you probably want. So definitely do that. Plus, it's my birthday in 6 months, and I'm trying to reach 10 average Twitch followers, and just be a nice birthday present to me.
So you want us to buy you Twitch followers?
No, please don't do that.
No,
That would be the worst.
No bots.
Oh, D-Larn pops in on Utah.js. He's a Utah now. Straight from, hold on, wait a minute. I'm trying to remember. I don't want to get it wrong. He's over on the other side of the world, but I'm trying to remember if he's on the big island or the little island. I think he's on the big island. It's been so long, D-Larn, I forgot who you are. See what happens when you don't come around?
So AJ, you mentioned Object.assign.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed my work has that like, quite a bit, and I have no idea what it means.
Then you should continue to work there, because maybe you have people that know what they're doing. Maybe. Is it all right if I type on this? Okay. Actually, no, I can't do that. I was going to say,
The second tab where you can.
I'm wondering if I could just plug into this one, but that seems dangerous.
It is.
So I use Dvorak, and so I can't use anybody else's keyboard.
Dvorak,
That
Because
doesn't surprise me.
It looked different.
it really does. No, he gave me this. He's like, okay, just log in. He gave me the password. Like 10 times I typed it in. I'm like, what? I thought he was messing with me. He goes,
All right.
oh, you're probably not,
Oh, I
using
can't.
the Dvorak keyboard.
I can't do a just. I don't know how to type on your computer. I don't even know how to get to websites on your computer. Your computer's too hard.
that's because QWERTY is your enemy.
But supposedly it's more efficient.
It's not about
Well,
efficiency.
To trip you up so that the typewriter wouldn't jam.
Yeah. QWERTY's made by reptilian overlords.
The reason I use Dvorak is that I used to get repetitive stress injury in my wrists. And so I switched to using an Apple trackpad and using the Dvorak keyboard. And the only time I ever get RSI now is if I'm not sitting correctly in my chair, which is almost never because I have an adjustable chair and an adjustable desk. But sometimes you have to sit at somebody else's desk for a few hours and it's not adjustable. But anyway. So Object.assign. So I prefer things that are obvious and intuitive and that are self-documenting, right? So for example, if I want to know what Object.assign does, I could Google it, end up on MDN, and then have no idea. Or I could end up on W3 schools and maybe get an idea. But Object.assign creates a new object. So if I have, say, name, we'll go with AJ, right? So if I do this, it's not that it creates a new object. Sorry, I misspoke. It merges objects together. So, but the first object that you give it is the one that it returns back to you. So if I were to do like this, and this example doesn't mean anything because of how contrived it is, but say for example you have some options, you have some default options, and then you have some user options, and you want to say I want to take the default options and I want to override whatever the user options are, and I want to get a new object that is a combination of both the default options and the user options. Assuming that your options are flat. If they're nested, this may not work because it's not a deep merge, it's a shallow merge. So what will happen is it will take whatever the first object you give it is, which normally is an empty object, because normally you don't actually want to modify the original. So for example, if we did say, oops, Again, I don't even know how to use the trackpad here. I'm lost. I don't know how to use other computers other than my own computer. So, you know, let's say that the default age is 42, or better yet, let's be true programmers. Let's say the default answer is 42. And then let's say that the user config is the user is going to set their name to be AJ. And then it's in the order of, and then you could say let current, let's say, equals. You would want to put in defaults first because they're going to be overridden. So if we have AJ has a different answer, well, let's say AJ, what's something else? Title would be, say, Your Majesty. By the way, if you pick up your phone, I did this because there was a meme about it, but if you pick up your phone and you say, hey Siri, call me Your Majesty, it will rename you in your contacts to Your Majesty, and then all emails to you. Other people won't see it, but anything that's coming to you will be labeled Your Majesty.
Yeah.
So that's, okay, so we do this, right? Title, whoa, bah, can't type. And we'll go with Mr.
Is there bit bindings on this site?
Don't, just
Probably not.
keep it kosher, man.
There's some sites that do it. They pull it off on.
So one thing I'm going to suggest, just as a general tip, is know what your code is going to do before you run it. And I think Christian does a good example of this when he's demoing the code. You know, he's always saying, you know, what do you think it's going to do? And this is a really good exercise because you should have a mental model of what your code is going to do. That way, when you see the result, you also have a mental model of, hey, does it match my expectations at all? Is it even close? So I'm not going to run this yet, but just take a look at this. And I guess I already kind of explained it, but it's okay. You probably forgot or weren't paying attention anyway. So why would I want defaults in the position that it's at? Why would I want config in the position that it's at? Why would I not want to do this, for example? Any thoughts on those things? And what will the result be?
So I think it seems like it's cascading from right to left. And I think you have to, I'm not sure, but I think the first parameter is like the initial. So I would actually, I probably would think you could do defaults in config.
Yeah, so if we do this, you're actually going to get the same answer for the first run of the application. But then as soon as you call this function a second time on a different user, all of a sudden Jane is going to be Mr. instead of Your Majesty.
Oh, didn't that overwrite?
It overwrote defaults is what it did. So that's why you give it an empty object.
But then Object.assign also returns its own object, right?
It returns the first one.
The first, yeah, okay.
So whatever your first parameter is, that's what it returns.
But if you just
An operator for objects in addition to arrays.
Yes.
So what if instead of doing Object.assign, you just spread in defaults and spread in config, would that do the same thing, or how would that be different than Object.assign?
So it would be less readable, less Googleable, and look a lot cooler. That's I explicit over implicit.
Can you have an infinite number of parameters inside of assign, or is it just 3?
It is an infinite number, so similar to the way that push works. And
So then does that mean you could do Object.apply and use a spread operator? No.
get out. Oh, maybe should I point this at me if I'm sitting here? Maybe, I don't know. I guess it's just pointing out to the ether right now, just so people can see what I look like if I want to. Anyway, Anything else, or maybe I should give Christian's computer back to him?
If config had a third property that wasn't inside default, would it just add it to it?
Yeah, because it does, name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, name, okay, done.
Yeah, it doesn't have name. So when we,
And if it does exist, it just overwrites it.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So all of this gets over, it applies in this fashion such that things that are to the right, more to the right, have a higher precedence. So essentially what it's doing is it's taking this object and then it's copying these properties. And then it goes to the next one and it copies these properties. And then it goes to the next one and it copies those properties. So I don't know what the internal optimizations may be, but you could basically assume that for in objects, it iterates over the properties in times, once per object.
Okay, makes sense.
All right, I will untake your chair, Christian.
No worries.
I
I'll
untook
take your chair
it.
back.
Wait, oh no, I took your chair because I brought mine around. Okay, same diff.
All right. Any other questions or anything else anybody else wants to discuss that would raise AJ's blood pressure? I think I heard a yes.
Wait, somebody said, "Who's that boss?" Ryan says it. Who is that? Who's the base?
The
Not
base.
boss, base.
Oh,
A little speck of dust here. That's you.
it's me.
Yeah, he wants you to join his choir.
Okay.
He's in
I've heard that one
Heber.
about 1,000 times, but.
Do you want to go join the choir in Heber?
I will pass. I'm a programmer, not a singer, sorry.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it was worth a shot. Worth the risk.
All right, so sorry, Ryan. No bass for you. Okay, so we got one more important thing to discuss before we have any other discussion and potentially leave. Actually, I do have to leave soon. Which is, who's presenting next month?
Hmm. Good question.
Okay, let's warm things up a little bit. Maybe I went in a little too hard and fast there. You know, maybe got to cut a little first before going for it. What do y'all want to learn about? I don't care. Get out. Don't you troll me one more time and you're walking out. That's the troll right there. That guy.
So I want to know about past references and values, and you know what I mean. So like how you can, why you shouldn't do array1 equals array2, stuff like that. I feel like that's kind of an under talk. I've never really seen anybody talk about it.
Pass by road.
Actually, this is probably the first presentation I've seen where.
Like things should be written like in more functional paradigm stuff.
Well, like why you can do x equals module.exports and then assign to x, you know, like.
I think he's talking about this right here. How we talked about on this line right here, where it says it's array 2. I said don't do this. Is a reference of array 1.
Yeah, so I would want to know a little bit more like some edge cases that might, you know, kind of bite you if you're trying to do stuff like this, or I don't know, that's just
I think that's a good lightning talk. Does anybody want to take that on?
You could put that in include scope, because I think that's kind of related in a sense. But yeah,
Yeah, let's go. Sure.
because they often go hand in hand.
All right. Other things we want to learn. I mean, I could just do a one-off on that for 5 minutes, or Christian, you could, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Also, the asynchronous power of JavaScript, I'm new to that, so, but that may be basic for a lot of people here.
No, nobody understands async.
Ace, not the way.
Well, there's 3 different things that people mean when they say async in JavaScript. But, okay, yeah, so when you say, well, I don't want to go into it too much right now, but.
Like asynchronous web page loading,
Okay.
that, in that context, and then I'd be curious to know the other context too.
Like, why is async good at all? Why is
Yeah.
it valuable?
I mean, that would be good to know, and then how to use it as well. Yeah, but with that as a starting point. Why is it good, and then how do we use it, and how do we not use it? Those sort of basics.
All right, I've got that one noted. Does anybody want to take that on?
I think you had a question or.
Oh,
I
yeah.
would say just like interview related stuff, and that's not really not specific at all.
So have you already watched Christians talk on interviews?
Wait, really? No, no.
Mhm. I gave one.
Yeah, so.
I could do it
so,
again.
Search Utah Node.js YouTube, and you'll find the channel, and look for talks by Christian. And he gave one at the beginning of last year. I want to say it was cold outside. Either the end of the year prior or the beginning of last year.
It was when we were at the old building. That was
Yeah.
one of the last presentations we had at the old building.
Yeah, and it was a good one, and it was a 2-hour discussion in total. He gave a 45-minute presentation, maybe it was an hour, and then we just BS'd for another hour and had a round table. Everybody talked a little bit about their interviewing experiences and coming out of boot camp, and so that's a good one to watch. So, I mean, we can totally do the presentation again, but I would say watch that and see how much value you get out of it.
I think there's a lot of turnover, so if I did it again, it would be like a whole new audience.
It's true. I'm totally.
It's basically, it's a presentation how to get your a new job in coding, whether you're trying to change jobs or you're out of coding boot camp or you're out of college. We could do that one again.
Yeah, I would like that.
All right.
Might
Cool.
get some newer people to come too,
No.
that don't have a job yet.
All right. So I have slated to do intro to Node.js, I think is what it is. Let me see what I actually, because I just put some things up there as defaults. If I don't get enough feedback as to what to do, we'll just do this thing.
I would like to hear that too. That's like 3 things now that I'd like, but yeah, Node.js basics.
Yeah, I mean, we are at the Node.js meetup. So I used to do Utah.js but I inherited Utah Node.js because this is the thing. JavaScript got too crazy for me. People started focusing way too much on silly nonsense and 6 million ways to do the same thing, but I don't know, feel cool. And so Node.js kind of became the learn the light side of programming meetup. Learn simple fundamentals, learn about the back end and the server. And we haven't actually had anything specifically about Node itself in a while. So we've got beginner's guide to getting started with Node.js is what I put as a stand-in for February, and workshop how to deploy Node.js apps like a noob and win for March. And then Creeds of Craftsmanship, the Go Proverbs for Node developers in April. But that would just be the AJ show. So we could mix in some other things. We could move those around. But yeah, I think maybe we keep with as scheduled because we already have a couple people signed up for the beginner's guide to getting started with Node.js. And then maybe we could do a Q&A session after, and I could work in some of these smaller topics like references. I feel like that's a 5-minute topic.
It probably
agree.
is, yeah.
Asynchronous is so broad, that's more of a discussion than a topic because it's too difficult to gauge what someone will already know or not know. So that needs to be me ask a question and literally wait 60 seconds for somebody to ask the question that they have that they feel too dumb to ask.
So the question and the answer are asynchronous?
That's right. See, I'm an equal opportunity offender, and you can take solace in this because you know that I'm judging you for how inexperienced and ignorant you are. So there's no extra burden of asking a dumb question because you'd be like, AJ knows I'm an idiot anyway, might as well just ask this question. No, that was, hopefully that wasn't as offensive as it sounded. But
Not
no,
at all.
I get that, you know, most of you don't have a lot of experience, and so all stupid questions are good questions. As, what's his name, Simon Sinek?
I don't know who that
Motivational
is.
speaker? No, you know who this is.
Simon Sinek? Never heard of
The
him.
motivational speaker, the start with why guy?
Yeah, start going.
Yeah, he always says, be the dumbest person in the room. See, Jeff failed at that. He's probably the smartest one in the room. He's the exception to the rule here.
Never heard of him.
I'm just the doorman, bring pizza.
No, don't play like that. By the way, are you hiring any JavaScript developers?
Not actively on my team. My team actually acquired a few JavaScript developers, so we actually do some front-end stuff at this point, but it didn't used to. But it wouldn't surprise me if somewhere in the org we are. I think we're just getting our 2022 budget stuff figured out, but even before that, I think we had 60 or so engineering headcount to hire in various areas. So if people are interested, we probably have something. I'm glad to do some legwork.
All right, thanks. Okay, so then, what do y'all want to learn? Let's talk about Node.js for a second, because I'd like to give a presentation. I'm really bad at beginner presentations, actually, because it's been so back when I had not yet evolved into a human and I was still a T-Rex. That's when I was learning JavaScript and Node. So sometimes I do really poorly because I don't remember what it was like to have the initial first 10 questions. And so I have to either watch someone else give a presentation or I have to give the presentation terribly and then realize my mistakes. So maybe I can get ahead of the game on this one. What are your burning questions about Node.js?
I think something that'd be interesting to learn is like scalability with Node.js, like when you go and
That is not a beginner topic, but that's okay, keep going.
yeah, like when you take your API, you know, from running on your little laptop to deploy to the world, like, you know, maybe what are some problems you can like run into,
Okay,
stuff like that.
yeah, that's a really good one. And I will give you a one-sentence answer for that right now.
Yeah,
Always run 2 instances anywhere that you run.
okay.
That will enable you to discover the errors that are in your code related to scalability. If you can run on 2 instances, you can run on 100. If you develop on 1 instance, you are creating problems in your code that won't work on 2 instances. But I'll put a slide in for that and repeat that next time.
Cool.
All right, what else?
Simple Node.js questions like, what is Node.js? What is NPM?
Okay, Node.js is V8 with lots of chocolate. NPM is a black hole that has the greatest gravity well in the universe. All right, next question.
How to use require?
Oh, yeah. Well, also we did, we were gonna have somebody talk about imports one time, and then he didn't show up. And so then I did an ad hoc presentation on imports. And if you have that question, go watch that. Again, it's on the Utah Node.js YouTube channel. But I will, yeah, how to use require. That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of good things to know there. All right, what else?
Simple things with Node.js is like, for example, error handling and how to do it asynchronously. You gave a great presentation on this when I first came.
Yep, and also there is a video that I have done specifically about async error handling in Express, which I think when people say, how do I do async error handling in Node, what they mean is, how do I do it in Express? And I have, actually there's 2 videos I have on that topic. I'm going to paste one into the Discord momentarily. Give me just one second here to bring that up. Just for anybody that wants to get a jump on it, you know.
Simple questions like, what is express?
Yeah, I had that question.
Okay, what is express? Yeah, that's a really good one.
Could you go over some of the pitfalls with async and middleware? Or routers in particular? No? That's not a joke.
I don't know what that question means. So let me translate for you how that sounded to me, and everybody else that may have made sense for. But what I heard was, could you go over pineapples and trash cans as car wheels?
No, so.
Because I heard that, it wasn't a dumb question. I'm just saying that what I heard was distinct words that have completely different meanings that don't normally go together.
So are there any issues you run into with async and middlewares and routers? Does that clear it up more? Does anybody else get it?
All middlewares are async, so we'll figure this out.
Okay.
Because because I think he has a really valid question. I'm not understanding it because, like I said, these words either mean completely separate things or they mean, because all middleware are async. So does anybody know how to clarify that question for me to help me understand it? Does anybody have that question? Okay, then I think people are not having that question because they don't know enough to ask that question. You know something. Show me a code example later, because I bet everybody in this room probably has the same question, but you're phrasing it in a way that you understand, and I'm not understanding, and they're not understanding. But that is not a fault of yours. That is too much experience over here, not enough experience over there, maybe. Who's using Express in this room? Okay, so we only have 3 people using Express presently. All right, do you all know how to handle async and middleware?
I mean, I don't know what you mean by handle,
Okay,
but,
okay, so you and I are on the same page,
yeah.
maybe. All right, anyway, were you gonna say something just a second ago?
Nope. I was just trying to think of like super basic questions.
Express middleware uses callbacks, right? Isn't that right, where you call the next?
Yeah.
Yes, that is the way that Express was designed back 10 years ago. That is not the way
That's what I used it.
that you ought to use it now. That will hurt you. It will not help you. All right, I did just post in the Discord the async await promises and error handling bit for Express, so if anybody's interested in that. Okay, other questions? All right. Okay, let's see, of the other topics, what do you want to know about interviewing?
How to get it all. I don't know, that's a very, very general vague thing.
There's things like, for example, how to prepare your resume, how to prepare, and I did a whole presentation on this, and I can do this again. I mean, I talk about this. I talk about preparing your resume, preparing your cover letter, the best way to go about getting a job. The short answers to that is networking, how to prepare for the dreaded whiteboard test, which is the pig that eats all your job offers.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the technical side.
But have you gotten past the other side? Because the technical side is the 20% of the process. Are you failing the technical side presently?
I've been in my job for a year and a half. Yeah, it's just been like 2 years since I've done like any interviews. Yeah, that's pretty.
But
That's
could you get into the interview room with the interviews you want to have?
Maybe, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Well,
I haven't really applied yet.
just because, I think we both agree on this, the 80% of the interview process is getting into the room, and 20% is not distracting the person from their desire to have you to fill the position for them.
Don't be your own worst enemy.
Oh, Jeff, you have a sentence to say on this at least.
Yes.
No, I think it's definitely some truth to that. I mean, most people, if it is hard to hire developers. So I think if you can not make people think that they will greatly regret hiring you, you have a pretty good chance at actually getting an offer. It's one of those things where you're like, if I hire this person, they're going to, screw up our code base or take down our systems or whatever. That's usually, or they're going to be irredeemable jackass. But, anything like that, those are the ones that are push people away. But I think if you're borderline, if people are like, well, I think it'll probably work, then you've got a pretty good chance of getting an offer. But a lot of ways of applying for jobs tend to get your resume eaten, which I think is where the networking is valuable. Because you send me your resume, I'll send it to our recruiter, they'll see if they've got any slots for it. You send it to our job website, I don't know what happens to it. I think ours works, but I've seen plenty of places where it's like, it goes through some sort of keyword filtering thing, and the odds of your resume actually being seen by a human are pretty low.
Yeah, so I learned this, let me pull up the word real quick.
White texting? Jeff knows what that is.
Okay, so there is, the system is called ATS.
Applicant tracking system, yeah.
I didn't know what that meant yet. I'm gonna mark that here.
The keywords on the job description have to match the keywords in your resume, so it says Node or Express or React or ES6, Babel, like that. Yeah, they just have to match up. But yeah, if it doesn't have some letter formula or something, then yeah, it goes into a black hole.
It's stupid because, as I'll tell you right, so my team does backend development, we're mostly Python and Go. If you have a bunch of C#, C++, Java, hell, Ruby, JavaScript, I'll say if you've got any two of those languages, you could be a perfectly valid backend developer for us. Because nothing we do is syntactically crazy. It's all learnable. That's mostly if you know how to write software. People who work with the ecosystem for too long sometimes get a little, like if you're only a JavaScript dev, sometimes it makes it hard to transition to some of the others. But if you've done something object-oriented or something C or C++ like a little more, and you have a little bit of breadth, usually you can pick up the other stuff just fine. So that's the problem is when you put in, must have experience with Go or Python or, whatever, it filters out the candidate pool pretty dramatically for people who we'd be perfectly fine hiring, because it's not the language usually, it's can you think about code? Do you understand how systems work? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, so if you're asked to upload something and it wants it in a particular format such as docx, just put in all the keywords that are in the thing above. Because when you get in the room, you're going to be with an entirely different person whose values are completely separate from the person who created the filter in the ATS. So I'm going to go on record, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, it is perfectly fine to lie in a screening process that is not by developer people if you actually have the confidence that when you get in the room, you can say, hey, I know that you said this, I just want to be clear up front. I put that on there because I don't know how your system works and I know that I can do these things that you need. As long as you can clarify that and you're not misleading the person when you get in the room, it is perfectly morally, ethically okay to lie to get past the ATS system because the ATS system doesn't understand. There's a disconnect between Jeff, as he just explained, a huge disconnect between Jeff, who wants to hire you, and the person that he doesn't even know the name of that is doing the thing that's preventing him from being able to hire you.
Sometimes the HR person will put down I want you to have 30 years of JavaScript React. It hasn't even been around that long, but he doesn't know that, or she doesn't know that because...
I love that with Node, back when Node was new, 5 years experience. Literally the dude created it in his college dorm last year.
But this person couldn't write a line of code to save their life.
Okay. Let's see, anything else? Oh, and by the way, Jeff, always feel free to interrupt me at any time, because I'm the main interrupter person. You're the person that has the real knowledge of what people need for a job, so just like I give him crap, or anybody crap, you are always free to give me crap because you're the person that has the most valuable information, more so than I do, for the other people in this room, I think. Because you're coming here not just because you love JavaScript, but you want to get, better career advancement, right?
So on the topic of interviews, in preparing for those whiteboard problems, I know, Christian, you mentioned leetcode.com is one resource you can use. There's Algo Expert, which I've used a few times. Do you just do a lot of these practice problems on your own to get a flavor for them? And is there anything else that you recommend, either AJ or Jeff or anybody else?
Watch the screen. So you go to leetcode.com, and then this is free. So whenever it loads, and then you wait, and then you have to go home, and then Christian answers the question later. And then you go to problems, and then wait again. And then over here, there are, I thought it was here. It's still loading. That's what I'm going to blame it on. What the heck? It was here last time. Okay, it's not all topics. Last time it was just right here. I'm sorry. I'm making myself look really stupid right now because they changed the website.
You're not looking stupid. This website changed. That's not your fault.
I think they did change the website. Because there's top interview questions right here. Top interview questions.
Are we still showing the screen? Yeah, I think we are.
If
Okay,
it
good.
loads, top interview questions. And
Apparently
it's
it'll-
not loading.
So play button.
Yeah, I guess blue button, something like that. And then what it'll do is it'll show you some of the top interview questions, so you can focus on the ones that are most likely to appear in an interview. And then what you're going to do is, let's say you click on one of these questions. Let's do interview. I'm just going to click on a random one. Like, let's say you want to do twosome, because this is a top interview question here. And you don't start typing here what your answer is. First, you get out, because you're going to prepare for the dreaded whiteboard test, you get out a pen and a paper and start literally writing it down by hand.
The man speaks truth.
Because when you're in the whiteboard question, you're not going to have the autocomplete. You're not going to have the IDE. You write it out by hand. And then you take what's on there on the piece of paper and you put it in here, and then you start running it.
Right.
And then let's say you need to tweak it. First you do it on paper, and then you transfer it over here.
Right.
And while you're doing this, you're also going to be learning a lot about algorithms.
Okay.
And I'm putting another video in here. This one is called Paper Programming and the Goblet of Fire.
Good name.
And I think this is the one in which I talk about what he's talking about, and I go through an example of here's how you think about this before you write the code, which is exactly what he's saying. You can find probably better videos than mine, but I know mine.
Do you guys know what it means to grind leet code?
Yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I agree on that point.
Because you could just go and start doing random algorithms on leet code. And of course, you'll be improving your algorithm skills and learning, but at the same time, those aren't the ones that are rated highest to be on an interview question. You want the ones that have the most highest chance to be on an interview question.
So
grind, what do you mean?
Just doing random
Oh.
algorithms on leet code or on any
Done like 400
algorithm
of them, like,
Yeah, so do the most common topics.
for interviews.
So I'm gonna interject before we go too much further. I want to give Jeff a chance to speak, but I'm gonna go first. The most important thing that I am looking for in a candidate is, can you document your crap? I will look at the GitHub profile, and if I see a bunch of crap, empty projects that have no README, I am moving on to the next person. I don't care what's on your resume. I'm going to look on your GitHub, and all I'm looking for is there enough information in the README that I know what your project does, hopefully a screenshot or a demo link or both, and can I the definition of success. You've not attained success until someone else can replicate your success. If you cannot help other people replicate your success, I don't want to hire you, because that means that you are a liability, not an asset. So that's number one for me, is can you document your crap? And when we go into the interview, what over the years, I've gone back to the stupid thing that in the beginning I said, oh, this is so dumb, da 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 da. I've gone back to FizzBuzz. Because in the interview room, everybody's clammed up, nobody's thinking clearly. The only thing that I need to know in the interview room is, can you explain the decisions you're making? Because you're not going to get FizzBuzz right. It's a simple function with 3 if conditions, or 1 if condition and 2 else conditions, and you're not going to get it right. I don't think Will got it right.
No, I got it right.
On the first try?
Hey, I documented my code
No, you were able to explain your process, but I'm saying, my thing is, you're somebody, you can code, right? And,
Yeah, so-
and you
so
in
it's-
front of a whiteboard, you
It's
know,
almost like getting in a fight, right? Because you're like in the fight or flight mode, so you're probably not thinking rationally.
Yeah.
If you exercise this stuff on the code, then it makes it a lot easier to maybe recall it, but you're still like, I gotta impress this person.
yeah, so I don't care about any of this fancy stuff, because people who know what they're doing can't even finish FizzBuzz correctly in one shot. So I'm not expecting you to remember, if I've got a coin slot machine and it's iterating backwards and there's an F-15 jet that's dropping prime numbers. Like, no, my bar is not that high. What I'm going to ask you to do is show me some of your code. Hopefully I can see enough of it that it's explanatory, and I'm going to ask you to do some sort of sample project that hopefully isn't going to take you too long, but I just need to know that you can do stuff. And number 3 is, when you approach the interview room, I think it was George Clooney that said this. I saw this somewhere recently. I think the name was George Clooney. But he had a problem getting an acting job, whoever it was, until he switched from the mentality of, I need the person on the other side of the table to solve my problem, to the mentality of, I want to show the person on the other side of the table that I can solve their problem. And so for me, it's not about you need to be able to write a FizzBuzz program. You need to be able to loop over arrays, but it's not about the lines of code that I want to test you on. It's, do you understand the context of the problem? The paper programming, the thinking process. So that, if anybody wants to comment, you got 10 seconds, and then I want Jeff to speak his piece on this.
Okay, I'll give mine. So first, every company is different. And like if you're looking to get a job at Google or Facebook, then
Yeah, you got to grind lead code.
they use this as a gatekeeper.
Yes,
So,
they do.
And the other problem is, every company that thinks they're Google or Facebook also does that, even if it doesn't make sense for them. So there's a lot of companies out there who will do these sort of problems even when it doesn't make a ton of sense. I can tell you our strategy. So we usually do we do an online assessment where we have 2 problems, and they're sort of effectively an easy to medium lead code. Neither of them is terribly hard. They don't require you to be crazy. It's just, can you solve a problem at home, with autocomplete and whatever you need. And that's sort of a sanity check of like, do we think the person can write code? In the coding portion of our interview, we often do start with FizzBuzz, which I used to think was stupid, but I've had people get stuck on FizzBuzz, which tells me they probably don't actually write code. When they're just like, oh, I give up, I don't know how to do this. That's a pretty good sign that they're not a strong coder, because it's not a hard problem. You might get it wrong. You might have oops, I did this condition wrong. That's fine if I can say, hey, what about this number? And you can go, oh, that's our mistake. Then I don't care.
That number's 15, by the way.
Yes, that's a classic. So we'll often do one that's a little bit harder, and I hate to say it, one that has come up is Fibonacci. And part of that's because most people will write a recursive solution, and then you get to talk about what are the trade-offs, how do you make it faster. Because a recursive solution calculates the same values over and over again. You duplicate a ton of work if you don't optimize. And so, and actually LeetCode's got a whole section on dynamic programming, which is how can you make it better. Or you can do it iteratively, which also tends to be faster. But that's really about, like, can we have a discussion about what the trade-offs are, and can you, if you had to make this faster, what would you do to it? Just because it's the meat of it is so small. There's just not much there. And I've seen some other problems, but they're all that level of difficulty. They're not something that requires huge algorithmic thinking. It's not something that requires you to use weird magic numbers. Those aren't that interesting. And then we have an architecture panel. We just talk about how would you design a thing.
System design.
Yeah, basically, it's a sort of, well, if you had to make a system that did this, like, what are the parts you'd use? What sort of systems would you use? Just sort of a discussion. It's supposed to be a conversation, but it's really just seeing if you've got a way of thinking through how I would design a system. And most of our positions tend to be more senior. We've hired a few people a little more on the junior side, but it's we don't typically do a whole lot of new. One or two new grads, but not a whole lot of boot camp, not a whole lot of that. So traditionally, we're looking for people who have a little more experience, and that usually shows in system design. And then honestly, the part I've been doing mostly is more of a culture fit, and I'm looking for humility. Anyone who thinks that they're like the best coder in the world is probably a toxic person waiting to come on the team. You want to see someone who's got some drive. They're interested in doing stuff. They're not just like, yeah, please just give me a job. We tend to be fairly self-directed, and I want people who can find problems and solve them without having to be spoon-fed everything. And especially at the more junior side, desire for learning. Because, once again, nobody does know everything, and so if they don't seem like they're interested in learning more, then they're not going to get better, and you have to learn things in any new position. So.
How would you even show that you like doing?
But sometimes it's people talk about things that they're interested in. Sometimes it's even I've had some people where I barely give them any questions because they just keep asking me things about our system. Like they're just really interested. Oh, how do you do this? Wait, how does this work? And so you'll see that sometimes. A lot of times people can show their interest in learning just by, what sort of stuff do they do on the side, and when they talk about projects, do they seem like they were excited to solve problems. Some people will actually ask, like, what's a hard problem you've solved? We actually also do have a brief presentation where people do, not for public speaking skills, but it's give a presentation on something we've done, ideally somewhat technical. And that's just mostly just gives people an opportunity to talk about something that interests them. And so that's actually a good place to get a feel. Some people, you can tell they're passionate about like certain topics, or they're just really interested in the guts of something. So it's a little bit of that part is not an exact science, but there's definitely, you can sort of get a feel for people who are interested in progressing and learning. There's some people who are just like, they want to be sat down at the desk, handed a ticket, they do the ticket, and another ticket, they do the ticket. They don't care about getting better, they don't care about learning new things. Honestly, a lot of people who are on the learning side, they seem excited about the technologies we're using, about the sort of things we do. A lot of it is process excitement. Like, if you don't want to learn anything, you're not excited to hear about things that we do differently or unique approaches we take. That's what I'd say. But like I said, everyone's got different approaches, and there are a wide variety of interviews out there, and some of them lean really heavily on the whiteboard, LeetCode problems. So we usually don't, because we don't, it's hard to write valid code on a whiteboard. And so it's more like, we'll get you to write something in pseudocode, and then we'll talk about the trade-offs. That's a more interesting problem for me. So I guess that's...
Adios, y'all.
Okay,
I'm late.
turning to pumpkin.
There's pumpkin out. In fact, that is indeed my pumpkin timer that I told my wife I would set so that I leave the meetups.
Yeah, so,
So you gotta join us and say,
yes.
I was just on the website.
Oh, really? Today, like, earlier?
That was fun.
It's good. Thank you very much.
And I'd be happy. So it sounds like the next time you're gonna do just basic Node, and
We'll
then
see. I don't know if I'm gonna. You might need to help correct me a little bit.
how so?
Well, if I start going too crazy. Adios, everybody online. Y'all have a